Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Mosca here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. So today we're going to revisit one of the breweries that I reviewed for you a couple of videos ago, and I was actually really impressed with the last beer that I did from these guys, which was their Doppelbock Dunkel, and you can find the link to this video in the video description there, so if you are interested in that, please check it out. But today we're going to revisit the Privat Brauerei Schmucker and have a little look at the Rosé Bock beer, and this was one that actually just sort of caught my eye when I made the notes on the history of the brewery and the other beers and stuff that they did, and this guy just really caught my eye because to me I would think it's a Bock beer with a bit of extra sort of red fruits and things loaded into it. So I'm really looking forward to actually reviewing this one for you today because it's a kind of combination that I actually quite like with beer. So as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a brief history of the brewery, tell you a little bit about the local area where the beer's from, and tell you about the other beers that you can get from Privat Brauerei Schmucker. But as I always say, if you are simply interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. So anyway, the Schmucker Brewery was founded in the year 1780, and it's actually a very strong regional beer brand which operates in the Rhine area, actually mainly in the area that's known as the Neckar Triangle, which is between the cities of Darmstadt, Heidelberg and Aschaffenburg, and they're located in a small town called Mossautal, which is just about 75 kilometres to the southeast of Frankfurt, which you will no doubt have heard of. But the brewery was founded in the year 1780 by Nikolaus Schönberger, and then it was known as the Hirschfurt Brauerei. But 20 years later, the Odenwald and the Black Dry Master, who you can see on the bottle there, became the symbols of the brewery, and after the marriage into the family of Johann Gottlieb Schmucker in 1895, the brewery changed its name for the first and last time, thus becoming the Schmucker Brauerei. And at this time the brewery was only producing 1,500 hectolitres of beer, so quite a small operation at that time, but that's not the case today. If we move on to 1958, the brewery became the first brewery in Germany to construct its own sewage treatment plant, which is quite a funny thing for them to point out in their history. But over the following 10 years, the brewery was continually modernised, and this included the construction of a multi-storied bottling hall, new fermentation and storage tanks, and also a doubling in the capacity of the brew house. And they continued this over the coming decades. In 1973, they actually exceeded the 100,000 hectolitre per annum brewing mark, and then 10 years later they broke the 150,000 hectolitre per annum brewing mark. In 1984, the brewery became the first in Germany to be decorated with the Good Honour Letter for their environmental policies for the business and throughout the Odenwald. They're actually very proud of the Odenwald area, and it's a very beautiful area of Germany, so they have to be commended for their attitude towards it. But in 2001, they also added a completely new fermentation, storage and filter area to the brewery, and this opened the following year in 2002. And then 4 years later, in 2006, the brewery became a member of Brau Holding International Group, one of the most powerful sort of brewery groups, if you like, in Germany. And they also host an annual festival in the last 2 weeks of July every year to sort of celebrate the culture of the Odenwald and the environmental preservation of this area, if you like. So they're a really cool company in that way, that they're so environmentally conscious, and they actually have a very, very rigorous process for selecting their raw materials and things like that. They always seek environmentally friendly cultivation methods for their raw materials, and they always really rigorously check their suppliers, and they're very proud of the natural beauty for the region, as I mentioned before. But the brewery itself also has a guest house and a restaurant where you can visit and stay, and you can also go for tours of the brewery, which when I looked at the website before seemed very, very cheap, and you can check those out. As I mentioned earlier, the website link is in the video description there. So to tell you about the other beers that you can get from the Privat Brauerei Schmucker, they have the Meisterpils, the Privat Export, they have their Hefeweizen, which is a Naturtrub, Weizenbock, Hefeweizen Dunkel, Kristallweizen, all the sort of 3 or 4 types of Hefeweizen beer, if you like, that are common in Germany. They have the Alcohol-Frei Weizen, they have the Weizen Radler, just a regular Radler, Kellerbier, Märzen, Schwarzbier, Doppelbock Dunkel, the one that I've reviewed for you already, the Rosé Bock, this guy here, Licht, which is just a sort of light beer, the Odenwalder Land beer, and also an alcohol-free Pils. And they also have another land beer which is called Raubacher Jokel, and they also have a Pils called Gude as well, which is quite an interesting one, I guess. So hopefully I can find those if I have time when I'm still in Germany. But that's the list of the beers and a sort of brief history of the brewery for you. So we'll have a little look at the actual bottle and things like that now, and then we'll get on with the tasting. This guy is quite heavy. It's actually an 8% Bock beer, and you can just see on the thing, as I mentioned, it has the Black Dry Master there, which I think maybe refers to the sort of mayor or some prominent figure in the town's politics in Mossautal. I'm not actually sure. It didn't say on their website exactly what the significance of the dry master was, if you like, but I guess it's just someone who's kind of fairly prominent in the old town's history and stuff. And this label that you can see on the bottle here is standard for all of their things. They just make them different colours for the different type of beer, and you can just see on the top it says speciality basically, with the dry master again, and the dry master is actually on the bottle cap as well, and on the back it just kind of says, oh, speciality beer with special character and brewed in accordance with the German Reinheitsgebot, which most beer is. And as I mentioned before, breweries in Germany are not actually bound by that, but they can't say on the bottle if that it's brewed in accordance with the Reinheitsgebot. If you know, it's more like a false advertising thing rather than being so strictly bound to it. But let's get on with the tasting of this guy. As I mentioned, it's an 8% Bock, and it said on the website that most of their ingredients are locally sourced, and the hops all come from the Hallertau and the Tettnanger regions in Germany. So let's get this guy open and see how we get on with the tasting here. So as you can see, a nice sort of smoky opening there as you bring it out. And we'll just get it out. Looks like a nice sort of dark coppery amber colour. Let's just see if I can get a bit more head on this guy. Yeah, give it a little bit of an aggressive pour there. Just make sure it doesn't go too crazy. Just from the little taste I got there, it's a very sort of malty tasting beer. But as you can see, if I hold that up, it's actually a very sort of coppery amber colour. It actually does seem to have a sort of quite a reddish tint. If I move it over just a little bit, it is definitely a copper one, but there is a nice little reddish tint to it, and you can see it's got a nice sort of two finger, very sort of frothy head, but there are some bigger bubbles in there. There's a lot of little bubbles of carbonation rushing up to the top there, but a really nice looking beer, and it's quite cool when it's a Rosé Bock that it does have this reddish coppery tint to it. So in terms of the aroma, it's very malty, and that's what you would expect from a Bock beer obviously, but a very malty beer. You pick up caramel and a lot of bread in it, I think. It's actually not too pungent an aroma, to be honest with you. You have to breathe it in quite deeply to get a good whiff of it. But yeah, definitely a lot of caramel in there, and some good bready malts as well. And I think there is a little bit of roasted character, I would say, with it as well. And I'm picking up on a little bit of red fruit as well, but that's quite faint. It's mainly the sort of caramel and bready malts that are coming to the front of it there. And there, yeah, just a very little hint of red fruit there, but it smells quite roasted, dark brown sugars and things like caramel and honey sort of thing. But there's a good bit of bread in there. The bread is actually quite prominent, and you can see the head on this guy has gone down quite quickly actually. So let's give this guy a taste and see how we get on here. 8% Bock beer, as I mentioned to you. A lot of alcohol warmth coming off this guy, that's the first thing there. But again, yeah, it's a very big sort of malty beer, if you like, and that's what you would expect from the Bock kind of taste. There's a lot of caramel in there actually in the malt base, and a little bit of roasted character, but the roasted character is going towards the back of the tongue, which is quite interesting. You've got that just kind of lying under there, the roasted caramel, and the bread is actually kind of quite subdued by that, I think, on first taste. Yeah, the roasted caramel and it really is pushing back the bready aroma. You can, the bready taste rather, you can detect it, but it really is quite subdued, and the roasted character of the caramel is actually quite dark. It's quite a strong thing, but I think the sort of alcohol warmth that you're getting off this beer is contributing to that and making it seem a little bit darker in that way. But yeah, there is a good little bit of roasted character in there. There's some nutty taste, I think, too, as well. There's a nice little bit of nutty flavour in there. Maybe even woody flavour is a good way to describe it, but I would always describe a more woody flavour as a bit of vanilla, and it doesn't really have a vanilla taste. It is more of a kind of nutty taste in my opinion. At the end, you're getting a little hint of the sort of dark fruits, a little bit of raisin, and a little bit of maybe plums, I would say, as well. Maybe even just a little bit of berry as well. But it really is, this guy is more of a malty beer. I think the fruits could be just a little bit more prominent in it, and that would balance it just a little bit more nicely. But it's a nice bock beer. And again, as I mentioned, I was very impressed with their last bock beer, so it seems that they do the dark style quite well, in fact. But yeah, you've actually got quite a little bit of bitterness that's coming out right at the end of the beer. And the fruits are in there, and the sort of aftertaste, if you like, is where the kind of mild fruit is actually coming out a little bit more. You've got a nice wet sort of mouthfeel on the aftertaste, if you like, and that's where the fruit is residing. And then you're getting the warmth. If you leave it a little bit longer than that, you're getting the warmth from the malt base and the alcohol. And as I mentioned earlier, you're getting the sort of dark roasted caramel flavours from that. But the bread is quite subdued, actually. And the only thing I would say about the taste with this is the fruit could be just a little bit more prominent, but it's a nicely done beer again, I have to say. And in terms of the overall mouthfeel, this guy definitely is full-bodied. This is more, I would describe this more as a sort of winter drinking beer, if you like, because it does have that nice alcohol warmth. This guy, I'm not so sure if it's one you want to drink through the summer, because it is quite heavy and it does have the sort of alcohol, the alcohol warmth that you would associate with something that's 8%. 8%, in my experience, is actually very heavy for Germany, even when it comes to the bock beers, I think. But 8, yeah, it's quite a heavy beer, and as I mentioned, this alcohol warmth that you get on the mouthfeel really does kind of help bring out the sort of roasted caramel character to it. But it's very, very well done again, and as I mentioned with the last Schmucker one, it seems that they do the dark beers very, very well. So I'm very impressed with this guy, and this is quite a fairly big producing brewery. So for them to do beer that tastes quite as good as this, it's good for a sort of bigger brewery, if you like. But yeah, the mouthfeel is definitely full-bodied. A little bit oily, I would say, but it is a more full-bodied beer. This is a sipping beer rather than a sessionable ale, I would say. But it's a good bit of alcohol warmth, like I've mentioned numerous times throughout the tasting part of this video. But it actually has a little bit slightly dry character to it as well, and it's an incredibly soft beer for the amount of bubbles and things you can see. But overall, it's a really nicely done bock. When it's a rosé bock, I would have expected the fruit to be a little bit sweeter and a little bit more prominent. But you know, they've done a nice beer, and that's the main thing, I would say. But with the rosé bock, like I say, it could have the fruit just a little bit more prominent, I think, and that would be a nice touch to it and sort of separate it a little bit more from the doppelbock and things like that, just to make it a little bit more unique. But again, the Schmucker Brewery have done a very, very nice beer here, and if you're into your bock beers, definitely give these guys a check out, because from my experience so far, it seems to be a style that they do really well. So hopefully I can get back and maybe try some of the other styles, maybe some of the Hefeweizens or something like that, and see how they do with a different style. So if you're interested in these sort of dark style beers, check out Privat Brauerei Schmucker. As I mentioned earlier, the brewery website is in the video description there, so go and check it out, and hopefully you'll find something that you like in there. I think they're producing some really good beer. So anyway, I hope you found my beer review informative, and like I say, go and check it out for yourselves. But thanks for your support over my 170 or so videos now. Thanks again to Schmucker Brewery for sharing my last video through Facebook and things like that. Much appreciated there. But please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer yourself. As I always say, it's interesting to hear that sort of thing. Thanks again for your support, and I'll be back with another beer review for you soon. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Cheers.